Hello there and welcome. It's Psychic Cynthia here, Spiritual Psychic Cynthia Killian, and welcome to today's video where I will be covering with you in the garden and visiting about the ancient Chinese oracle, the I-Ching. Now, some people also pronounce this name of this oracle as the I-Ching. Mainly Western speakers will say that, English speakers, because it is spelled, the name of the oracle is spelled capital I-Ching. But my understanding is that that is not a correct pronunciation. The more correct pronunciation is I-Ching. The I is an E sound. So just so you know, if you hear somebody talking about the I-Ching oracle, they probably mean the same thing as the I-Ching. And actually, I think an even closer to correct being, derivative more of the Chinese language sound, would be something like the Yi-Jing. But mainly over here in the West, we call it, and I guess West is relative compared to where you're at, but we call it the I-Ching. So that's what we're talking about today, and this is just a quick video to introduce you to that if you're not familiar with it. And I've had some questions lately about the I-Ching from students and clients because they saw that I did a video reading using the I-Ching. So without further ado, let's just dive into this and talk a little bit about what it is for you. First of all, the I-Ching is both a book and a divination system. I mean, actually, it's a spiritual system in its own right. And how it came about, I mean, really, you could spend a lot of time studying that if you wanted to in the history and getting into it. But just a short synopsis of this system, according to the written record, is said to be about 5,000 years old. Now, the folkloric record, in other words, the stories about it and the traditions hold it to be even older than that. So it's an extremely ancient system. It's, to my knowledge, I mean, probably the oldest divination system on Earth. It didn't start out as a book, okay? It evolved over thousands of years. And one thing to understand about it, I think a lot of people, maybe even those who use it, and it's easy to utilize, by the way. Now, it's not easy to understand the I-Ching in its fullest depths because it is a very deep, rich spiritual system as well, if you wish to explore that part of it. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But most Westerners that are utilizing the I-Ching are, relying upon the I-Ching for oracular advice or guidance. In other words, they're utilizing it more as a divination tool than as a spiritual system. Even though when you use it as a divination tool, you will get some deep spiritual insights often. So even if you're not trying to, quote unquote, study it in that way and work it in that way, I think if you utilize this tool enough, you can't help but be influenced by it in a positive spiritual way. So getting back to how this came about, just so you understand a little bit about this tool that you might be thinking about learning. It's shamanic in its basis. And, we don't know for sure because it goes back so many thousands of years, and I definitely believe it's more than 5,000 years old. There's so much discussion in the folkloric and the mythological record. It has to be, but let's just say it's only 5,000 years old. These shamans, living out there, in Asia, particularly around the regions we now call China, they were either, well, there was two methods originally, and some people say this was the first method and other people say this was, so it's not settled, but either this came from the reading of tortoise shells, so that these were probably tortoises they were going to eat for food, I imagine. So they would crack these shells and then there would be different lines in them, and these lines would start to form pictures and ideas. So they were reading off these, like a simple divination system off these tortoise shells, basically using, it's like reading animal bones, right? But then there is another ancient way, and that's the yarrow sticks. Yarrow is a plant, right? You've probably heard of it. And it's found throughout many parts of the world. So it was found over there in this ancient region as well, in the East, in Asia and China. And so they were cutting up these stalks and reading them. From the research I've done, I'm leaning towards the yarrow plants were maybe the first, maybe slightly earlier. But I don't know that it matters. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to suggest they were being done at the same time. So, but either way, whether you look at it, what you had is these people who were, more shamanic based, because of course they didn't have organized religion yet 5,000 years ago there. Or if they did, these people weren't participating in it widely. So they were attuned with nature, and they were either using an animal spirit, that would be the spirit of the tortoise, to tap into, this totem of the tortoise to get guidance, or they were utilizing the plant ally of the yarrow, the plant spirit. So yes, this has deep shamanic roots, and some of you who are on a more nature-based path might be interested to know that. That might even, make the I-Ching more appealing to you. That's one of the reasons I was really drawn to the I-Ching when I learned about its shamanic base. I was so excited to learn more about it, even though we don't usually practice it in those ways in modern times. And we'll get into that in another video, like the actual ways you'll practice it. But here we're just talking about what it is. So that's just a little bit of its history, and actually it has a very long, rich history. And I'm not going to go all into that in these videos. If you need to do more of that, we can do a more in-depth course. And I'm thinking of doing a more in-depth course for those of you who want to learn more. If that's something you'd be interested in, you can let me know in the comments here. But in the meantime, what happened is, they started reading the system, and then let's just leave it to some famous people in China, and I'll get more into this in subsequent videos, but some kings and rulers and stuff started getting more into the I-Ching and building on the commentary. So eventually, over time, these interpretations to go with the oracle were written down, and over a very, very long period of time, hundreds of years really, there was more of a system. It became more codified. Does that make sense? And I'm not going to get into all that codification right here. We can do that again in future videos if I wish to do that for you, and if you want to watch those. But the important thing to understand is that a book emerged out of this, and it is the oldest book on the planet that is in print. And that is what we mean often when somebody says, I'm reading the I-Ching. Well, they may be throwing the oracle, but they may have the book. And what it basically is there are what's called hexagrams. Now listen, hex doesn't have anything at all to do with black magic, like some people think a hex means black magic. Study your Latin, study your language. Hex equals 6. Okay, so they're called hexagrams because there are 6 lines. And for example, here's a picture from one of the books I have sitting here of a hexagram. You see that 6-line picture? That's a hexagram. There's 6 lines in there. Okay. So over time, this system has evolved with 64 hexagrams, and you have just 2 kinds of lines that can be in a hexagram: a straight line or a broken line. It kind of looks like 2 mini straight lines, but it's actually a straight line with a break in the middle. So that is the basis of this system. The straight line is aligned with the energy of Yang. It is considered masculine. It is considered firm and hard. It is considered hot. I mean, there's all these correlations, but basically, for this very beginner level video, what you need to understand is that the straight line is considered Yang. Okay. And by the way, when I use the word masculine here, that is a polarity. That doesn't always mean a man or a woman. It's not necessarily gendered, because, we all have yin and yang energies in us. It could represent a man. Yes, it could also represent, a woman with that, masculine, what we call active energies, okay? And of course, if you've looked at the yin-yang symbol, you know, that symbol with the black and the white, you can see that in the midst of the yang, which is white, in that symbol, there is a black dot for yin. And in the midst of the yin, which is black, there is a white dot for yang. And so what that means is even when you have a yang line, it holds a yin potential. Okay, I'm getting too deep here, but yes, there's always a little bit of yin, even in the strongest yang, and there's always a bit of yang in the strongest yin. That's the way the universe works in this system, okay? And really, I want to say this about the I-Ching. You know, it's all part of a larger system. You know, if you study, say, Chinese medicine, acupuncture, or Chinese herbs, or like I like to study and practice Chinese astrology, I mean, these are all interconnected systems. Unlike, well, you know, when you study tarot and astrology, there are some correspondences, but they're not as thickly connected, as strongly connected as these Chinese mystical systems are. They're very much interconnected. So, and really at the basis of them all, you have the yin and the yang and the 5 elements. So these are very important, especially the yin and the yang. If you're not up on the yin and yang, you know, there's much information available about that in books, videos, so you might wish to do some more research on that or not. That's up to you. But anyway, for today, understand that the straight line in the I-Ching hexagram, any hexagram, there's 64 total. These straight lines are yang. I seem to have a little visitor here. This is a squirrel. I apologize for that sound. He's mad because one of my cats is out, so but he'll get over it. Hey guy, the cats live here too. They're not after you. They're too old. Don't worry, he can't hunt you. Okay, so moving on to the broken line in these hexagrams. That represents the yin energy. And really, and I'll do a different video over this, but you can do a very simplistic I-Ching reading. I don't even know if I'd call it I-Ching reading. It's a coin reading. Have you ever taken a coin, like a quarter or whatever your coin is? And I mean, I know right now we're facing a coin shortage at the time I'm reading this, so I don't know if you even have a coin to do this with. I do. But have you ever taken a coin and flipped it heads or tails to make a decision? Have you done that? Heads or tails, right? And you say, if it's heads, I'm going to do this. If it's tails, I'm going to do this. Or heads means yes and tails means no, or vice versa. You know, it's the same concept here that, you know, you're looking at yin and yang, the heads and the tail. It's the yin and the yang. And by the way, that concept is very important if I do future videos for you, review our course together, because it's actually, coins are the most common way of casting the I-Ching in the modern days. So, yes, that whole heads and tails things will become relevant later. But for now, it's just yin and yang. So you have these two sets of energies. And, you know, if you wanted to get some easy practice right off the start, you could get your coin and you could designate one side yin and one side yang. In the way that I was taught, in a lot of systems, the heads is the yang and the tails is the yin. But really, there's no reason you couldn't flip that around. You just have to set a system for yourself. You have to decide so that it's not arbitrary, right? You have to decide what it will be every time. And so you could flip a coin. You know, you could say, you know, and technically, you know, if we were doing it this way, a lot of times yin would be no and yang would be yes. I mean, on the most simplistic level. You know, yang is kind of like, do it, move forward, and yin is like, no, rest. That's a little deeper. But I don't know, it could be either way. Again, you have to set the system for yourself for this little exercise. So you would flip the coin, and you could generate one of these lines. Anyway, that's maybe getting ahead, but it could be a fun thing for you to do, because I know some of you like to work ahead. So this system, again, it's based on yin and yang. You have straight lines and broken lines, and they form together a 6-line hexagram. And actually, what we'll talk about later if we go further, the hexagrams are all composed of trigrams. 2 trigrams. What is a trigram? A trigram is a set of 3 lines. And the trigrams evolved before the hexagrams. So, in other words, as this system was developing over 5,000 plus years, it was starting out with the trigrams, probably actually starting out with a single line. You know, heads or tails, yin or yang, well, even before coins, yin or yang, broken or straight. And, you know, this system developed for the trigrams. They could get a lot of answers that way. It started lining up elementally and with certain aspects of nature and certain qualities in day-to-day life. But then it wasn't quite enough, so they had to get more complex with it and evolve. In other words, you know, evolution was long in this system and very complex, you know, until we get to the system we have today. So the trigrams are important too, but you know, basically all the lines are yin or yang, and there's 64 hexagrams. Now, in order to understand these hexagrams, because we're not taught these meanings in the modern times, especially not in the West, you will need the I-Ching book, or I suppose you could go to a website. I do recommend a hard copy book if you're actually going to work with the system as to get answers for yourself. And there are different translations. Now, if you are a native Chinese speaker, you could probably get some really good translations written, you know, closer in the original tongue, or at least in Chinese, Mandarin, or whatever the different dialects are that are offered. But for those of us who speak English, you're going to need an English translation. There's a couple that I recommend. My absolute favorite, because it was the first one done in English, is the translation that is published by Princeton University, and this is the Wilhelm Baynes translation. It's called simply the I-Ching, or Book of Changes, which most of them will be called that, most translations. The foreword is by Carl Jung, which is spelled J-U-N-G, and if you don't know who that is, he was a great mind of more modern times, not today, but just a very enlightened being. He was a psychotherapist, a mystic, so much more than that. Anyway, I do recommend that translation, and again, I believe that's by Princeton University Press. It's in the Bulletin series. If you want to find it online, just Google the I-Ching Richard Wilhelm, W-I-L-H-E-L-M translation. And then it was translated into English by Carrie F. Baynes. Okay. So that is the one I recommend. Now, I know this is pretty thick. Now, this one's actually 3 books in one, because you have the I-Ching poems and you have more in-depth. You don't have to read it all, but it's a really good translation. Now, another one that I've really taken to working with, and I like to use in conjunction with the Wilhelm Baynes translation, is the I-Ching Workbook by R.L. Wing. This is more modern language, and the interpretations are very accurate, very good, very useful. They're put into more modern language, but they're also deep. So I highly rate this one and encourage you to get it. Please, if you are just using this on a superficial level to get guidance, you might just get this one. But if you want to know a little bit more about the system, I do recommend getting this one too. I do recommend, going back to the roots as close as you can. At one time it was a goal of mine to learn how to speak and read some of these Chinese dialects so I could go back and read the manuscripts myself. I've since thought maybe I'm not going to do that in this life. That's going to be a lot of work, and maybe I don't have to read the original language to get the spirit of it. But still, I do recommend the Wilhelm Baynes in addition to the I-Ching Workbook by R.L. Wing. So you'll need the book. And by the way, on this I-Ching book, or you could just use a website. Actually, if you're just dabbling, just find a website of I-Ching translations. And no, I don't know one to recommend off the top of my head. I have a few I use. Mainly I use my books, but I'm sure you can find one. This book, the I-Ching, it means roughly translated. It's very difficult. Or Yi-Jing, remember? That's another way of saying it. What it means roughly translated is Book of Changes. And this system is based on the idea that everything is in a constant state of flux. So when you read on the I Ching, it's not so much predicting the future, actually. I want you to know that. I don't know that the I Ching predicts the future. In my experience, more as it gives you a window, an insight into what is happening right now, and it actually gives great advice. Not all oracle systems give advice, but this one does. And when you read on this system, you are contacting, in my opinion, in my experience, if you're open to it, you are contacting the wisdom of the ancient masters, of Confucius, of Lao Tzu, of the Chinese immortals, of all the known and unknown wise ones, the shamans who participated in the original creation of this system. All of that energy is encoded in this system. So you're tapping into that. You are getting advice from the wise ones. These calm, serene, peaceful masters. I believe and I experience that their energy is in this book, and that they talk to me when I cast the I Ching, and they can talk to you too. And they will advise you. And their guidance is sound, it is wise. It's all about timing. They will tell you what not to do at the moment and maybe what to do. They can't always tell you how it's going to turn out, because there's this principle of free will, and free will is, spinning along with the wheel of fate. Okay, in the Chinese astrology, which kind of could overlap with the I Ching, basically there's this idea of 3 different kinds of fates, and one of those is heaven fate. That is your birth chart, basically, in the Chinese, or you could say Western too. Chinese astrology, Western both. But then there's earth fate too, what you make with your destiny. So that's why, the I Ching can't tell you everything that's going to happen. But that being said, it is uncanny in its accuracy, and I want to prepare you for that. If you're going to work with this tool, the answers will be so startling sometimes. It will speak to you in such forthright terms. It's uncanny, okay? It's just uncanny. And if that excites you, then work with the I Ching. If that freaks you out too much, then maybe don't work with the I Ching. I like a really accurate divination system. I am a professional psychic medium. I have highly honed intuition. I don't often have to use the divination tool. But if I want to, or if I feel that the situation is special and warrants it, I want that tool to be highly accurate, inherently accurate. And that's the other thing about the I Ching. I find that, it's more accurate than the reader. Like, it doesn't matter if you are highly psychic or not. It doesn't matter if you are the best reader in the world. I really think any person could, any person who could learn the system, okay, if you can learn how to throw the coins down and how to add up the numbers and look up a hexagram, and you can read, if you were able to read, and you have a translation in your language, any person could read on this system, any person that can do those simple things, and you can get startlingly accurate answers for yourself and others. It is just amazing sometimes, and scary in a kind of cool way, kind of like, wow. So, yes, I guarantee you that if you can read and you can do some simple arithmetic, just adding up some very simple, I don't want to use the word math because it freaks me out, but I'm talking about adding up like 3s and 2s. It's very simple. You can figure this out, and you can get access to some of the guidance of the most amazing masters who have ever walked the planet. That's what the potential is here for you. And my goodness, here it is. Like, I'm making a video for you about it on YouTube, and you can just order these books on Amazon. How amazing it is that we can access this in this day and age. So I'd like to invite you to join me on this journey into the I-Ching, and hopefully there'll be future videos. But even if there isn't, get your books ordered and start with it. And by the way, the I-Ching is a Bible in the East, in Asia, and especially China. Do you know how here, I don't know, maybe you don't know this, but I'm from the Midwest, and here in the Midwest of the United States and other parts of the country, when we say, the good book, do you know what I mean when I say the good book? When I say he swore on the good book, or we want to have the good book here, we mean the Bible, right? The Christian Bible. Well, in the East, when you say the book, I'm going to consult the book. I mean, you'd say it in probably Chinese, or whatever language it is, whatever dialect. But when you say the book, you mean the I-Ching. That's how sacred it is. It is the book. So it is a Bible for those over there. And actually, I consider it one of my personal Bibles as well. Sometimes, even when I'm not doing an I-Ching reading per se, I'll just open it up and read part of it. And I always get great guidance, even if it's not applicable to that day. It goes deeper than that. So you can go as deep as you want on this journey. If you just want to cast some coins and get some answers about your specific questions, you can certainly do that. And the guidance received, I mean, it can save you so much pain and help you move in the right direction. It's like, again, having access to these great advisors and counselors. It's amazing that way. I can't think why anybody wouldn't want to read the I-Ching. I mean, to me, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to if you were able to. So I do invite you on this journey. I mean, even if you're just going to utilize it for the reading, and then there's the whole spiritual depth part of it. How you can grow as a person on your spiritual path by opening to their wisdom. And I must say, the wisdom of the East, the wisdom of the I-Ching is so sorely needed right now in the West. And if you start reading it, you'll understand more about what I mean. All right, so this is a wrap. And I want to thank you for tuning in today and learning more about the I-Ching with me. Hopefully, there'll be future videos about it. I don't know. I'll ask the I-Ching and see what he or she says. Until next time, I'm Psychic Cynthia signing off and wishing you all bright, bright blessings and the wisdom and guidance of the masters with I-Ching.